today's episode, we take a look at how to reinvent a bedroom by making small but impactful additions. You know, when people think about changing a room, they usually jump straight to big solutions: new furniture, new paint, or a full renovation. But the room already works as it is. But a few key additions can transform it, making it feel more warm and visually satisfying. Now, this bedroom is a good example. Everything is neat and exactly where it should be. The bed is made, the furniture fits, the layout works. But there's very little warmth, very little character, and not much visual satisfaction. Nothing is wrong, but nothing is really working either. This is where a lot of people get stuck. They know the room doesn't feel quite finished, but they can't explain why. So they assume they need to start over. But usually you don't need to start over. The first change just happens on the bed. Adding cushions immediately improves the room because it adds depth and contrast. The bed at this point stops looking flat and the space starts to feel considered rather than just, bare. When choosing cushions, it's a good idea sometimes to mix the sizes and textures. For example, you could have one large cushion in the back and two smaller ones in the front. You keep the colors in the same palette, but sometimes vary the material, like you have one cushion that's linen, one that is velvet or woven cotton. They all add interest without clashing. The only changes now have been the cushions, but the room already looks better. Next, we add a throw, folded lengthwise and draped across the lower third of the bed. This makes the layering look intentional and polished. Or you could just throw it across a corner of the bed, and that's what it is, a throw. The color connects back to the cushions, which is what makes the room feel pulled together. And so it doesn't look, that is just a random throw. You can look at it and tell that even though it's just thrown across a portion of the bed, that it really was styled. At this point, the bed works, but the room may still feel a bit disconnected. If it does, that's where a rug comes in. Once the rug is added, the room settles, the bed feels more anchored. The furniture everything seems more connected. Now, the rug should extend at least 18 inches on either side of the bed, and natural fibers like jute or wool or cotton, woven cotton, add warmth without competing with other patterns. Now, using a rug to tie the colors that are already in the room on the bed, like the black and the beige and the rust, makes everything just feel even more cohesive. Now, if a full-size rug isn't an option for your room, or you just don't want a full-size rug, a smaller throw rug could be placed beside the bed or at the foot of the bed and can achieve a similar grounding effect and add warmth. Now, this is a common issue in bedrooms. You have good pieces that don't quite speak the same language. A rug can fix that. And then the lighting. Switching to the cooler metal lamps changes the tone of the room without changing layout or furniture yet again. The space feels more modern and more elevated. Now, when choosing lamps, consider the scale, the material. The base should relate to the nightstand, the size of the nightstand, and the metallic finishes can add contrast without overwhelming the space. So just consider scale and material, as well as the amount of light that it will, not to forget, the amount of light that it will shed depending on whether you read in the evenings in your bedroom or not. Now, the final addition to all of this is the plant. A plant adds height, softens the lines, and brings, life, little nature into the room. One statement plant is usually enough because we don't want so many plants that, the room starts to look cluttered. And but the mother-in-law's tongue is a good plant to put in your bedroom because apparently it purifies the air in the room, making it perfect for a bedroom. Now at this point, the room feels finished because every element has a purpose. Yet, nothing was replaced, nothing was renovated. Each improvement came from layering and making clear decisions. So if a room in your home feels off, don't assume you need to rip it apart and start from scratch. Start by just identifying what you think is missing, whether it's warmth or contrast or grounding or just some excitement or balance, and then just change one thing that could bring that element that is missing into the room, and then just layer from there. Over the coming weeks, we'll take a look at other rooms in the house and how we could, without spending a lot of money, just add elements that can bring about big changes. Because remember, reinvention begins with a desire for change and the courage to act on it.